Bam, and we are live. Welcome to the second ever edition of a recap show here on the Fly and Brian Show. On this edition of the show, I've got a guy that is famous for post-fight shows. His name is Andrew Lawrence, and you're like, who the fuck is that? And I say, the Clown Kid, and you're like, I know exactly who that is. Andrew, what's up, my friend?
Nothing much, man. A good night of fights. Two fantastic quick finishes. You need them when it comes to these late night cards, man. You need that excitement to spike a card, and it happened for us. What's up? You said an expert, someone famous for post-fight shows, and I was like, who's that? Who do we have on? Who else is talking with us? But no, it's fantastic to be here.
Karen Bryant's going to be joining us here in a second. She's going to kind of take over for your spot. So
I would love to be in any debate format with Karen Bryant. The universe will never let that happen.
Speaking of Karen Bryant, before we get into the main event, here's how the podcast edition is going to work here. We're going to talk about the main event, the co-main event. Then we're going to see if we have any shitty comments from Twitter or YouTube comments, shitty-ass questions. I know that our fans have some cool questions. And then we're going to get into the I'm going to call it round number 2, where we talk about the rest of the fight card. Round number 3 is going to be where we give the thing a grade. We're going to give our "Are you fucking kidding me?" for the entire fight card. Before we get into any of that, this edition of the podcast is proudly brought to you by Tapped Out Brewing. It is an up-and-coming brewery from the middle of nowhere, Nebraska. Right now, it's just a home brewery. So follow them on Twitter at Tapped Out Brewing. It's actually just me. I'm brewing. Going to start my own brewery someday. Going to do a GoFundMe to start making some beers. So, Andrew, let's just talk about this main event. Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Michael the Menace Johnson. I think most of us going into this thought that Dustin Poirier was the harder hitter. Not the case?
Apparently not. I thought that Michael Johnson, if he had a shot in this fight, was going to be playing on the outside and kind of playing pitter-patter, point fighting him, using a jab, using his faster hand speed. And what ended up working out was hand speed, but there was a hell of a lot of power behind it. You forget Michael Johnson works with like Henry Hooft and those guys, and that style of Dutch kickboxing is kind of like bring the violence and bring power punches and land shots that can swing a fight drastically. Poirier was hurt by those shots. I know there's a couple crazy assholes saying that that there was an early stoppage, but no, he was doing the stiff arm. It was a completely valid stoppage. Michael Johnson, you can't. I said going into this that he was the more athletic guy, but that he couldn't bring the pain like you bring the pain, Jesus Christ, like Dustin Poirier could. But that didn't prove out. Maybe we're seeing that Dustin Poirier is finally like reaching the size disadvantage at 155 as well.
You know, I thought since he went to 155 pounds, we were going to see. Well, we have seen a lot more durability from him than when he was at 145 pounds. I thought that we would see that on Showcase here today. And to the people saying that was an early stoppage, are you fucking high? Eyes closed, got the stiff arm thing going on. My buddy likes to call that first he had the baby deer legs. He went down stiff as a board, bro. That was. If we want to talk about early stoppage, we'll go into the co-main event here in a second, where I'm not sure it was an early stoppage, but you have way more of a case if you're going to argue that in the next fight. Dustin Poirier, he had a cut under his eye like right away, and as soon as I saw that cut, I thought, man, I'm going to lose my bet on Dustin Poirier. So I just forked it over right then, forfeited, and took the defeat. Dustin Poirier, I think he's going to be one of these guys that's going to bring a lot of excitement to fights, never enter the top 10. Was he in the top 10? Never enter the top 10, top 5 of the UFC lightweight division. Michael Johnson, yeah. I said before this, if he were to win this fight, I think that we should give him, let me look, Michael Chiesa. What do you think about Michael Johnson versus Michael Chiesa?
Has that fight not happened? It may have. Michael Chiesa is got that grapple style, and of course, Johnson's got the striking. So it's a fantastic kind of clash of styles. It's kind of a classic grappler versus striker matchup. You know what? It kind of seems like a win against Dustin Poirier somehow forgave a lot of sins for Michael Johnson, because he's coming off of a 2-fight losing streak, looking not too great in either of them. one against Nate Diaz, where he just kind of he was expected to win the fight and just got kind of steamrolled and trampled in the last 2 rounds. People remember that as a close fight, but if you remember that 3rd round, it was kind of Nate Diaz streaking away with it. So Michael Johnson, this is a good. He got lucky a little bit with the showcase that he was in that he got to erase a lot of career downsides in this one quick KO.
It was his 3rd 2-fight losing streak of his career and his 2nd in UFC competition. So that's just, I mean, that's insane. Yeah, you're talking about the Nate Diaz fight versus Michael Johnson. As soon as Nate Diaz pointed at him, it was all Nate Diaz after that moment. Nate tried that against Conor. I don't want to get into that whole thing at this moment. But, yeah, big things for Michael Johnson. He avoids the first 3-fight losing streak of his career, coming off the 3rd 2-fight losing streak. And I don't think he has fought Michael Chiesa, and both those guys are tough alums. As much as I hate The Ultimate Fighter, they're both off of The Ultimate Fighter, right?
Yeah, they are. But you said tough alums, and you slurred it together like it was like one word, and I was like, "What's a tough alum?" Like it was some exotic animal.
It's sort of like a snuffleupagus.
Exactly, like some imaginary creature that you invented as a child.
No, I invented it as a pure adult. Andrew, don't be questioning my imagination. I got a full-fledged imagination over here.
Good.
So, main event, pretty surprising. It put a stamp on this event, made it start this show pretty early. Let's move down to the co-main event. Uriah Hall, Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson, was that his 4th TKO stoppage in the 1st round in a row?
Yeah, like 3rd or 4th, something like that. It's fantastic either way. God, Derek Brunson, the dude who's a wrestler, and you always have that problem with wrestlers. They fall in love with their hands, and then they think too much of themselves. But he doesn't have that problem at all. He's kind of hitting that Johnny Hendricks stride, finding his power, especially in that left as a wrestler. So I see a lot of good things for him. I want to see him fight with the elite and get a title shot, get a #1 contender match, something like that.
Right now on Wikipedia, it says that Chuck Norris defeated Uriah Hall via TKO in the 1st round.
I would believe that would happen if Chuck Norris is wearing stretchy jeans.
Of course he is. American Eagle flex jeans. That's the only jeans you should ever wear. I don't get paid by them, but if you were to wear jeans, you have to wear basically the ones that are polyester. Derek Brunson, like you said, he's this wrestler, but it's not like he's fell in love with his striking. He'll threaten the level change with his shoulders that allows him to open up his striking. Same thing with Lorenz Larkin. Basically, he would go for the takedown early, then he would fake the level change, and then got the better of the Monsoon with the striking there. Obviously, somewhat of an early stoppage. I think it was okay based on how Uriah Hall kind of fell down, but then the ground and pound, Brunson didn't land any of it. So what do you think of the stoppage, Andrew?
I was fine with the stoppage. I thought enough of it landed clean, and Uriah did also try to single leg the referee a little bit there. If you notice, the leg that he grabs is definitely the referee's leg in that last couple of minutes there. So he might have recovered a little quicker than we thought, but he looked woozy on the come up. I'm always in favor of protecting these fighters and letting them live to see another day, because it's not boxing. This is MMA. People can recover from a lot of losses and still be in marquee matchups and in big fights. So this loss by Hall doesn't define his career. Let's not let him take too much damage.
I totally wholeheartedly agree here, especially where Uriah Hall is one of these guys, he could spinning heel kick some jobber.
Hold on 1 second here. On Wikipedia right now, it says that in the co-main event in the middleweight battle, Herb Dean defeats Uriah Hall. TKO punches 1 minute and 41 seconds of the 1st round.
MMA fans are fantastic, right?
Well done, gentlemen.
I've put a few things on Wikipedia myself in my day, and they just get deleted and changed immediately. You have to screenshot your funny ass shit before it changes. Like if I were to refresh, I'm sure it changes. You mentioned about how people thought it was an early stoppage and how we want to save people's brains from further damage because they can come back really quickly.
Yeah.
Ryan Stan was adamant that it was an early stoppage, and I think that Joe Rogan might have been okay with the stoppage. And that brings me to a thing that I was talking about basically to myself early on in the night, is if Joe Rogan were to leave, his replacement is probably Brian Stan. Would you accept that?
Yeah, I think that Brian Stan does a great job. Well, I think it's interesting where he digresses when we talk about, fighter head trauma, because he's a fighter who stopped in the middle of a promising career because of, his, the head trauma he'd taken and the worries that he had for, the longevity of his life if he continued his mixed martial arts career. At the same time, he's also a fighter that stopped. Remember he was in Alessio Sakara or someone's guard and was pounding away and clearly knocked him out. And he made the decision to stop the fight. So he might have a better eye than, say, me or you to see when a fighter is completely out or not. But he also may have a threshold for damage that he's willing to see a fighter take that is too high, just because he's been desensitized to violence after a whole career of it. So I'm not sure if ex-fighters are the right voices we should be listening to when we're talking about how much damage a fighter should take before a fight should be stopped.
I saw you on Twitter the other day talking about how even if Joe Rogan stops commentating from cage side, we need him around just as like a voice of reason, because this guy understands head trauma. He understands the intricacies of the game. I know that this would not be a job that he would take, but can you imagine Joe Rogan as Joe Silva? The job takes too much effort for Joe Rogan to do. He just wants to smoke weed and do his podcast, but he would be the best person for the job.
All we actually need is just Joe Rogan being alive and just saying stuff, because he'll be like the moral voice of MMA. And Joe Rogan's probably the only person equipped to be the moral voice of MMA, because this sport shouldn't have too strong of a moral voice. So a guy like Joe Rogan's perfect, because he's like, guys, we shouldn't soccer kick each other in the head, but everything else should be cool. There should be no gloves. I love that Joe Rogan preach. But he's just an interesting guy and a person who can be, especially when the issue is something that's blatant and very obvious and is somewhat political. Joe Rogan's a guy who will take a stand and say, no, we should do the right thing in here, not because we want to play to any political faction, but this is actually how it is. And I think it comes from a career of being someone who is extremely honest in his commentary. And it's useful to have a perspective of someone who's not a fighter. He somehow is the voice of the fighters while not being a fighter himself, and I think that perspective is very valuable.
I think that's enormous, and on top of that, his years and years of experience of being that voice of the fighter and from calling the fights cage side. This guy basically brought people like you and I, our level of knowledge, he brought us into this sport. He's been calling it the entire time I've been watching, and also been listening to his podcast. So he's groomed us into the mixed martial arts fans that we are today. I can't imagine the sport without him. If we're talking about a guy to replace him, Brian Stan would be my go-to man to replace him. I saw a lot of people talking about Bas Rutten, but I don't want Bas Rutten, because then we're going to be hearing about liver shots and leg locks 80% of every single one of the fights. But then I think, well, Joe talks about eye pokes all the time. If you had a choice between Brian Stan and Bas Rutten, who are you taking?
Oh, we're taking Brian Stan all day. Well, Brian Stan lacks from the Joe Rogan perspective, or what Joe Rogan brings as a color commentator, is, I think, this genuine excitement and enthusiasm. Not to say that Brian's not enthusiastic, but Joe's reactions are visceral, where Brian's more intellectual. And I think that he is more of a measured person in personality, and that's very evident in their broadcast styles. But Brian Stan over Bas Rutten infinitely, because he could talk about the intricacies of the game, and I think he's the kind of commentator we need now in modern MMA, because there's a baseline understanding of what's happening, but we need people who can explain complex things like fighting in simple ways so that it's digestible for common fans. And I think Brian Stan's a guy who's uniquely capable at accomplishing just that.
I agree wholeheartedly. Brian Stann is perfect for that position in that sense. Sometimes people criticize him for having a favorite or whatnot, and he's mostly about the
Penny
striking.
Robertson tonight was his favorite. Did you notice that?
Robertson?
Yeah, he was in love with Robinson when he was clearly losing the fight. He called basically the first round, 2 rounds as if they were for him, and I scored both the rounds against him.
That fight was extremely ugly. That was one of the worst fights.
I deleted that from my brain. Yes.
I tried to. I tweeted that I was going to try to delete that from my brain. I know, but Brian Stann is mostly about striking. Joe Rogan mostly about grappling, even though he does have some credentials in kickboxing, I believe, but he mostly likes the grappling. I know that this would never happen because they're both color commentators, but can you imagine a fight card, just one, at least one, where they are together?
Yeah, I've always thought the 3-man booth would be fantastic. Joe Rogan, you got to keep Goldie around because you need a guy who does the normal shit, the actual job of being a broadcaster, kicking it to commercial, talking about the commentator, talking about the advertiser, and announcing the fighters, reading the details. Joe Rogan ain't doing that shit, and neither's Brian Stann. But what Brian Stann would do in the booth with Joe Rogan is kind of keep Joe Rogan in check on his really wild and crazy shit. And I think just like having someone in there to like keep Joe on point makes Joe a much better broadcaster. Because when he's there and Goldie's clearly the smartest guy in the room, you know what I mean? So he could just throw it lackadaisically all around because he's like, Goldie's going to fuck up way worse than I will no matter what happens tonight. But if Brian Stan's here, he's like, man, I got to get it together. I can't eat this edible weed like during the third fight. Like, you know, I got a goddamn drill sergeant next to me. I gotta perform, you know?
I don't think you've ever made more sense than you made just now. That makes pure sense.
Yeah.
And I didn't think you were going to make any sense when you were like, we got to keep Goldie. And then you brought it full circle, and then all of a sudden Goldie made sense. And right now he doesn't make any sense. I don't know why you're not working for the UFC right now. Andrew, before we get into the rest of the card, let's move into some listener questions.
We got some. Let's go.
Part number 2 of the podcast. We do have a couple of questions. Very few, but let's go with them. So Robert Jones at Bagline01 asks us, I've been drinking. The show, I thought about calling it
I've been drinking.
Yeah, hair of the dog or something like that, because, you know, I want to do this show, but I also want to drink beer, and I decided that I'm not going to sacrifice either one of them.
Yes. Life isn't about making sacrifices. It's about making bold choices, my friend.
And I want to drink my home-brewed beer. This right here is a blonde. I'm calling it a blonde. It's kind of hoppy. It's kind of got a slight malt taste. Pretty sweet. Anyway, Robert Jones asks, what do y'all think about the Brunson? No, he actually says, let me restart. What do y'all think about the Branson versus Hall stoppage? So what do you think, Andrew? We already talked
we talked about it a bit, but like I said, I'm fine with it. We need to protect fighters and stop fights earlier. Here's the deal. When you go from being in a stand-up situation and you hit a punch that's so clean that it puts someone on their ass, or even worse, on like fully on their back, that's a substantial, that person has a concussion right there, bare minimum. Now, so you have to, as if you're a referee, start looking at that fighter as, when do I stop here? And he took a long time recovering, where he was just blatantly taking shots to his head, you know, leaving his head exposed and not improving his position. If you see that happen and someone answers like 4 or 5 or 6 unanswered blows, I don't understand how you don't stop that. That to me is a clear stoppage, and that's the kind of stoppage I want to see referees make. And I like that he made a decisive decision and stuck with it. I don't like, there was a referee earlier tonight who did like the hover thing. You know what I mean? He was like hovering around the fighter, like, I'm about to stop it, I'm about to stop it.
Wasn't it Herb too?
It might have been Herb as well. Herb was fucked up tonight. He had all kinds of weird. Herb's been out of sorts, man.
Well, I remember Uriah Faber versus, God damn it, Brazilian guy.
Henan Barão.
Yeah, that was like one of the worst
knocked him out,
stoppages ever. Like Uriah's looking at him, giving him the thumbs up, and he stopped it. That was one of the worst ever stoppages by Herb Dean. But Andrew, there's a video on YouTube or on the interwebs you can check out that has Big John McCarthy and Herb Dean, and they tell you the 5 stages or the 5 levels of a knockdown and the severity. If we're looking at severity, Uriah Hall falling straight backward with his hands up was a number 4. So that's like one from the worst knockdown you can have. And at that point, if he doesn't like respond after a level 4 knockdown, you have to stop the fight.
Yeah.
I think the first stage was, like it's just a knockdown from pressure, like it didn't hurt you, but it got you off balance, knocked you down.
Sure. Yeah.
Number 2, knocks you down. You're scrambling like, oh my gosh, here I am. I'm with it. I fell down. I'm right back up. 2, 3 is something like
when they put you down in your ass. You get like just pop down, and then you're like, boom, you hit your ass, and then you're like, whoa, there I am. Yeah. I gotta get the fuck up.
And 4 is arm stiff, fall straight backward, and I think that's what Uriah Hall did. And at that point, like you said, dude obviously has the concussion. You have to stop the fight if he doesn't do something severe to get back up and get back into the fight.
Yeah, you have to make a demonstrative effort that you are going to be in this fight, not just like survive and like be there to take more punishment, but to be there and be able to intelligently fight a combat event.
Yeah, you have to be competent.
Also, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but remember you mentioned the Uriah Faber fight. I always kind of thought that fight might have been a good stoppage, because if you remember how he gets dropped, Uriah Faber, before he gets dropped, gets hit in the face, fully face plants, hits the canvas, like his whole face, whole chest, whole body, face down, smashes on the canvas, goes like out. The smack of him hitting it wakes him up, and then he's grabbing a single leg. To me, and then he throws up like the thumb thing while he's getting hammer fisted in the head after that happened to him. So I felt really bad for Herb Dean there, and I thought that's a severe, like, I don't know if that's a 4 or 5, but to me, you get fucking knocked right the fuck down, face planted against the canvas, that's a 5. Like, stop the fight, we're good. You take the night off, buddy.
Yeah, from your description, that would be a 5. I watched Hennenbrow versus Uriah before I watched the video on Big John explaining it, so that would be a 5. Basically a 5, Terry Edom.
Oh yeah, that's death.
That is a 5. Our second question comes from Mike McFadden at Real Mike McFads.
Hey, Mike.
Nice name, Mike. Preemptive Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez prediction. Also, who should Brunson fight next? I think he's 1 win from a title shot. Let's start with the Brunson thing, Andrew. Let's start with who he should fight next and how many wins it's going to take him to get a title shot.
Yeah, right. I think he should be fighting into a title shot. Like, he should be having a number 1 contender fight. But that division's a goddamn mess, so there's no way that's probably going to happen. It might take him 3 fights to get there, because Yoel's fighting the man Chris Weidman, right? And we got whatever's going on in London. So after whatever happens in London, they're going to have either a Rockhold or Chris Weidman fight. So in the meantime, he's going to have to take at least 1-2 more fights to get anything. Now, who does he fight in the meantime? Let's take a look at these rankings and figure out who's a good matchup. I wouldn't mind him with the loser of whoever loses in London. It's happening right around now. But, most likely that's going to be Dan Henderson. He's not going to want to fight. Lyoto Machida is still on suspension. Gegard Mousasi's booked to fight Vitor Belfort. Tough matchmaking here.
Robert Whittaker.
There it is. Boom.
If I know that Anderson Silva and Robert Whittaker have been in talks lately for UFC Melbourne. I think it happens on November 27th. It's right after UFC 205. But if that fight doesn't happen, Derek Brunson obviously took no damage. He could easily return on 67-ish days and fight Robert Whittaker in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, but if he takes that fight, then he's not 1 fight away from the title. He has to take that fight, 1 other fight, and even potentially another fight after that until he gets his title shot.
There's such a bottleneck at the top right now that if he were to fight 1 more time and then a title shot, that's going to take a year. We have this meaningless middleweight title fight happening between Michael Bisping and Dan Henderson, and then you got 4 guys that are in this little tournament to get the next title shot, and likely so one of those guys is going to win their fight. Let's say, so Rockhold has Jacare. I'm going to pick Jacare. So Jacare wins. He gets a title shot. Yoel Romero, I'm picking Yoel against Weidman. he doesn't get the title shot, he has to wait a little while longer, and then Brunson has to wait a little while longer and longer and longer.
This Honestly, is what I'm saying. Brunson's made himself the injury replacement in that 4-man tournament, though. If you look down the line, it's not Gegard Mousasi, it's not Vitor Belfort, it's not probably going to be Anderson Silva. I think Derek Brunson makes a real good case for himself. If any of these guys slip out with an injury, he slides right into that kind of 4-man tournament to determine the next title challenger.
100% agree. And also, so on the rankings, we've got number 5, Vitor Belfort, number 6, Anderson Silva. I don't think that either of those deserve to be there. I know that they're there because they're legends, but let's be real. They don't. Neither of those guys beat Gegard or probably Robert Whitaker.
They're in the rankings, but they're not in the title picture.
Right, which is stupid. I'm going to throw this. It's out of nowhere, out of left field, but I've been talking about this for days. The winner of Rashad Evans versus Tim Kennedy should fight Derek Brunson.
Yeah, sure. Especially if it's Tim Kennedy, I like that fight a lot.
That's
I hate that fight for Rashad Evans because Rashad Evans will get steamrolled for no real reason.
I think that Tim Kennedy steamrolls Rashad Evans. I really do think that. I mean, that's going to be my pick. And then because Tim Kennedy, even though he's number 13, we all know that these rankings mean nothing. Tim Kennedy's only loss, I know he hasn't fought in 2 years, but his only loss is against Yoel Romero, and it was kind of controversially.
Yep.
So, and also he beat Michael Bisping. So even though he's kind of in the discussion.
Absolutely, he's in the discussion. Tim Kennedy's a win away from probably being in the top 10 easily. If he wants to string together a couple wins, but Tim Kennedy's been a victim of his own. Penchant for fighting with the UFC brass and his penchant to do other non-MMA activities and just be an overall wild, talk crazy shit dude. But that's kind of his appeal. So keep doing what you're doing. Be a wild ass dude. I don't think Tim Kennedy is someone who I naturally have always thought, he needs to become a champion or he's such a talented fighter. He is of championship caliber. But, in the current situation with Michael Bisping as the goddamn champion, yeah, Tim Kennedy looks like a dude who should probably be mixing it up and seeing if he can't get, a piece of the title while it's being passed around.
With Bisping as the champion, it seems like everybody has a chance to be the champion.
It's just fight Bisping after Dan. That's what the goal is. If you get that, you get the belt, kind of. That's what everyone's thought process is. And I think fans think that too, and you can see why.
It's kind of my thought process. I know that he did TKO Rockhold, but it still hasn't sunk in. I don't know, for some reason.
It doesn't seem legitimate for some reason.
If Tim Kennedy decides to fight twice in 1 year, maybe 3 times in 18 months, dude could get a title shot probably, but probably not going to happen because he likes to be an Army Ranger or whatever they are. So second part of the question, early prediction for McGregor versus Alvarez. What do you got?
Oh, shit. Conor McGregor beats Eddie Alvarez, I think, because the kick game. I've always said that Muay Thai typically, right, Muay Thai beats boxing. That's why I like Cowboy over Eddie Alvarez when they fought. I think that the kick game and being able to utilize, that aspect in that outside range that boxers really can't fight in and deliver damage in will always pay dividends. And I think that Conor right now has learned the skills of kicking legs. I don't think he'll go with that avenue. There'll be inside leg kicks, if anything, not outside. But he can also, throw those fancy Taekwondo kicks and find his range, and then come flying in with the left hand. And that's obviously, or that's what I believe will end up cracking Eddie. Probably get him a TKO KO victory in like the second, third.
I don't want to say a solid prediction on this fight like you did. That was solid stuff, Andrew.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't want to put a solid prediction on the fight is because I got to admit it. I'm a McGregor mark. I hate to steal from the WWE, terms of, the glossary in the back of the glossary book for the WWE. But, man, I am a Conor McGregor mark. I love watching this dude fight. I love watching him talk shit. And I would pick him over Eddie Alvarez. Basically, I don't think that Eddie Alvarez deserves to be the 155-pound champion for some reason. He lost convincingly to Donald Cerrone, and ever since that, I'm like, this guy doesn't deserve to be the champion. And Conor McGregor's Pretty fantastic. So I think that's all we have for listener questions. I have one more notification. Nope, nothing. All right, let's move on to the rest of the card. We have free reign. Andrew, pick any of these fights that you want to talk about, and let's go in on it. What do you think?
All right, let's talk about Gabriel Benitez against Sam Sicilia.
Okay, main event of the Fox Sports 1 prelims.
That's not a thing. That's not a real thing.
It's not a real thing. Dana White thinks it's a real thing. It could be a real thing if it were a pay-per-view fight, right?
I don't have to indulge like crazy people's fantasies when I visit them in the asylum, so I don't have to indulge Dana White. It's a prelim card.
All right, so Gabriel Benitez featherweight fight versus Sam Sicilia, technical submission, guillotine choke, and snot blowage at 120 into the second round.
Grade A snot blowage. Fantastic stuff. I said going into this it was a really good fight to watch because we were going to see some fantastic leg kicks. We saw a fantastic whole array of mixed martial arts from Gabriel Benitez. And this guy seems like a guy who could actually be a star for the Mexican audience. He had good mic skills in Spanish, I think. I was feeling the charisma, even though I don't understand the language. So props to him. I've always liked Sam Sicilia and thought he was a tough dude. Clearly he's hit hard times and, you know, has a penchant for getting into too many wild slugfests that don't go his way. And people seem to catch him in submissions a bit too frequently. And this might be the end of the road for him in the UFC. And if so, you know, part of a tough live 155-pound class that was really exceptional and did a lot of everyone or a lot of fighters from that season of Tough went on to have pretty good careers or still are evolving in the sport. But, you know, hats off to Benitez. If there wasn't for those last, you know, couple finishes, I thought that he definitely had a performance of the night bonus going his way.
Gabriel looked way bigger than Sam Sicilia.
Yes.
Is it that Gabriel is closer to 155, or could Sam ever make 135? Is what I was thinking as soon as I saw these guys in the cage. And I know before I saw them against each other, I thought Sam's going to knock him out, right? Because Sam's got this huge power for 145 pounds, and then he looked tiny in comparison to Gabriel Benitez.
Yeah, Sam. I don't think that Sam's able to make 135. He's just really broad. He's not the tallest, 145. You know, of course, he fought on Tough at 155, but you got to make weight like week after week after week. Probably a natural 45, or just not a big guy. He's just kind of a squat dude with broad shoulders and carries a lot of muscle on his chest. But you're right, he does seem like he's carrying less muscle mass. He is 30 years of age. At 145, that starts becoming old. Unfortunately for those lighter weight classes, anything over 30, you know, it's a young man's sport, especially in 155 and less.
The age is a factor the more you go down in the weight classes. So you could be 40 and successful at heavyweight, and then like 28.
It's impossible at featherweight.
Impossible. Like what, 28 maybe old for 125 pounds?
Yeah, or if you're DJ, you're hitting your stride, right? But there's very few people like DJ. So I think you're hitting your stride until like 29. I think as soon as you turn that magic 30 at 125, 135 pounds, that's when all the days are fighting against you.
I love playing matchmaker on the podcast, but Gabriel Benitez, 145 pounds, I don't really have anyone to match him up against other than naturally. Perhaps you give him Chaz Skelly, but Chaz Skelly wants to go higher in the rankings. But, I mean, they're two guys fought the same night, both had convincing finishes in a similar manner. It would just make sense to just put them together in the next fight card. Like you said, he does have some charisma, Gabriel Benitez. He at the beginning of his speech, he was speaking English, which is pretty fantastic. So that tells me a lot of things about the future going down the road, about his post-fight speeches. He's going to have some Mexican, of course, people are interested in him. And then also as well, American people, English-speaking people as well. He's going to generate some interest with that. I mean, dude's a fantastic, extremely fun fighter. So he just I love you, my bitches. That's all this dude has to say.
Yeah, you just need a tagline. He could develop it. He's being a smart guy. Learning that English. He can, being bilingual is just such a huge asset because you're dealing with an American company. As much as they're looking at you to be a Mexican star, and thus this is really a card that wasn't meant for the American audience. I was talking about this earlier. This is really, pointed towards, for Mexican Independence Weekend holiday. This was counter programming for the Canelo fight. And Gabriel Benitez and all the Mexican fighters early in the card, so you could watch those fighters before you had to turn to Canelo. I think was a smart move by the UFC. You could have Gabriel Benitez fight the winner of Renan Barão and Felipe Nover, especially if it's Renan Barão. I think that'll be a good fight. You could do a Brazil versus Mexico thing. It's a big step up for Benitez. If Renan Barão is coming off the loss, he'll need like a step up. And you could do, Gabriel Benitez and like Jason Knight, something like that. There's a lot of options.
That was fantastic matchmaking right there, Andrew. Boom. Wow, fantastic! Cue the applause meter. Cue it.
Dude, I'm pitching myself for the job. I'm trying to get hired over here.
You're pitching. No, you're batting 1,000 right now. That's what you're doing for the baseball. People had to watch some baseball before they got in the preliminary card. That's supposed to be on Fox Sports 2.
One of my favorite things is when people start freaking out because there's a baseball game finishing up on FS1. Like our events always bleed over into other people's programming. It's a regular thing for the UFC to run long, but heaven forbid they want to watch the 10th inning of a baseball game. Everyone's up in arms that they have to watch it in standard definition on FS2 like fucking lowly people.
Which is absolutely ridiculous that we have to run long because we have a fight that finished in 19 seconds, yet we had to wait, 25 minutes before the next fight started?
This is MMA. If you haven't learned on fight nights to multitask and get a lot accomplished, I don't know what you guys are doing out there. I plead with you to get like some sort of hobby, play a video game on the side at the base level. But you could like start an online business while you're watching these things. You could, do some search engine optimization gigs. You could figure out some things to do to make some side incomes while you're, watching commercials on FS1 here, people.
Yeah, Andrew, I was gonna say, man, hey, starting a business or doing some marketing, I'm not actually doing anything cool. I play Rocket League while we're waiting 25 minutes between Chaz Skelly and Maximo Blanco.
You could convert that time into income, my good man. This is what I'm on the podcast for. It's my grand pitch. Join my market. No.
A pyramid scheme. Oh yeah, multi-level marketing. Okay, gonna sell me some Quick Star. Yeah,
you have to understand, I am at the top of this pyramid.
Let's talk about the fight that I've been alluding to a whole bunch. Chaz Skelly, Maximo Blanco. In my pre-fight show, I said, Chaz Skelly, kind of a boring fighter. Don't look for this fight to be very exciting.
Yeah.
Fucking Hulk Hogan flying kick to the chest into a anaconda choke in 19 seconds. Holy shit, what was that?
Yeah, it was fantastic. That's what it was. And to call it a Hulk Hogan boot, like, no one was going to say that before you said it, but since he said it on the mic afterwards, it will forever be remembered as the Hulk Hogan boot. Really effective. Maximo Blanco was trying to do some crazy shit, but he out-crazied the crazy. And, hats off to him. He got a really weird choke, too. I think it was an anaconda choke, and it turned over bizarrely. So, props to him. I assume he's getting $50,000. You can't break the record for fastest, submission in 145-pound history and not get 50 G's.
Dude, obviously has to get 50 G's. So let's just give that out right now. Towards the end of the show, we'll give out our $200,000 bonuses. So we're giving one out right now to Chaz Skelly. Obviously, this guy gets one. I love interacting with this guy on Twitter. He likes talking about drinking Coors Light. So not only is this guy normally boring in his fights, but he drinks the most boring beer in the entire world. And then he comes out with this flying kick and then breaks the record for submission victory. Chaz Skelly, you dirty son of a bitch, are one crazy motherfucker. Andrew, I want to talk about Islam Makhachev versus Chris Wade, and not because it was the most exciting fight in the world, but
it wasn't.
Because if you are a fan of grappling, it could have been one of the most exciting fights in the world.
Well, I grade every single fight, right? So, and I grade this a B minus, and a B minus fight for me is a fight that was really good, that just had moments that you were like, yeah. When they were scrambling and when they were having reversals, it was action packed, and it was, and this is a back and forth fight. This is a fight that I thought Chris Wade won the first, and then the second and third went to Islam, and it was close in the third. There was definitely moments where Chris Wade had dominance in position. It's one of these grueling, grinding fights. If you are into jiu-jitsu and if you've done it, or if you like that kind of style of fighting, you enjoyed, and if you're like, Jesus Christ, when's this going to end? Well, then, that's your prerogative as well. But yeah, overall, this is the fight that I enjoyed. I thought that it had the potential to be this. I thought that if it was stuck being a kickboxing match, that we probably would have been more bored than we were with how it ended up when they were grappling. A real solid fight, and hats off to Islam. A good victory here.
Speaking of that fight, you mentioned the first round you gave to Chris Wade. Yeah. I had a small debate on Twitter of who won the first round. I actually gave the first round to Islam Makhachev, or Mahashev, however the fuck you want to say this guy's name. And this comes down to how you want to grade rounds. And I gave round number 1 to Makhachev because Wade only landed 2 more significant strikes, but for like 3 minutes or something, Islam had Wade in his triangle. It probably should have been a 10-10 round. What do you think?
I think that holding someone in your triangle can be deceiving in that sometimes you're not in danger when you're in someone's triangle. You're still actually in positional control when someone has a triangle on you. You're still holding for top position, unless someone's squeezing it and has it cinched in tight, which he did for a bit. It looks scary. But honestly, I gave that one to him. I don't care really who I was going to score that first round to, because I always got the second round to kind of readjust and bring myself back. You have to understand, I judge in a real loose, interpretive way. I just judge in a manner that allows me to score, to give the winner of the fight to whom I think should become the winner of the fight. I'm not beholden to the rest of the rules of fighting like the rest of you gentlemen are. So I just gave the first round to Wade. I could have given the second round to whoever. I was going to have that 19-19 going into the third no matter what.
Speaking of this translucent or free-flowing scoring,
yes.
Juan Jucao Carnero versus Kenny Robertson. I said going into the third round, it was 20-20. Show me something. And they showed me nothing.
Yeah. Not the most exciting fight. Nothing to write home to mom about. I had Juan Carnero 30-27. I think someone else did too. Maybe one of the judges. Yeah, 30-27, a 29-28, and a 28-29. Kenny Robinson to me seemed outclassed the entire fight. Brian Stan was in love with everything he did. It was sloppy. It wasn't great. Yeah, it was just like not a great fight.
It was what Kenny Robertson was doing was, it looked terrible. I know this guy.
Fade Kenny Robinson always. If you're a betting person, just wait until Kenny Robinson fights again and bet any amount of money against him, and then you collect. That's all you have to do.
Gosh, unless he's facing somebody that can't grapple whatsoever. Oh, here we go. Kenny Robertson, CM Punk. I'm totally kidding. Let's not talk about that.
Kenny Robinson would wipe the floor with him.
But Jucao, if this guy would have just let his hands go ever, could have finished the fight at any moment. Yep. At any moment. He landed an uppercut basically whenever he wanted to. And every time he landed it, Kenny Robertson would smile. And it's you know that when a guy smiles, he's affected by the punch. But he threw it like maybe twice per round, and that was pretty damn disappointing. So let's not talk about that fight anymore. Belal Muhammad versus Augusto Montano. Belal did not live up to the hype that I had for him, but he had a pretty good performance.
Yeah, God damn it! They put a huge number against Belal Muhammad. What did he close at? A -450. I was advocating taking a micro shot on Montano because I hated that line, and Montano definitely fought better than some guy who was +400. He looked pretty good out there. showed kind of some veteran savvy that you don't really expect from a veteran of the Mexican MMA scene, if we're being frank. But Bilal Muhammad looks like a guy who could do something, a kid who can really develop. But this was not a good fight. This was a boring fight, despite the TKO in the third round. It was a plotting affair. Bilal Muhammad was clearly the more athletic, the more skilled fighter, but just wasn't putting it all together really well. Montano looked better than he's ever looked, but that didn't really say much because he's looked really poorly in his last couple fights. Nothing really to see here. Let's just move on. Who cares where we're going to match up these fighters again? We'll see Dodger on the next Mexican card, I guess.
Yeah, probably. I saw a lot of people picking Montano over Bilal Muhammad, but you have to be reminded that Augusto Dodger Montano lost to Cahal Pendred. A man who loses to Cahal Pendred should be faded 100% of the time. The rest of the fight card kind of sucked, to be honest with you. Andrew, are there any points that you want to talk about in the rest of this fight card?
Jose Quinones beating Joey Gomez. That was actually a really fun fight. Could maybe get the fight of the night, even though it was 30-27 for Jose Quinones. Because Joey Gomez is a guy who wants to bang, clearly not high level, but they were well matched. And then the first fight of the night was okay-ish. There was a draw. Alejandro Perez against Alberto Morales ended in a draw because Morales got deducted a point for throwing after the bell.
It was actually Perez got deducted a point for throwing after the bell, but it was so stupid because both of them threw after the bell. And then
this is MMA.
He took a point from Perez as the round was going to start. And it's like, first of all, bro, you have to take the point when the round is over before they talk to their corners. And then second of all, both of them threw after the bell. So that was so stupid.
No, it was MMA, and thus it made perfect sense.
Yeah, it did make perfect sense. Randy Brown, Eric Montano. Eric Brown would have lost if not for what I called a Hail Mary guillotine choke.
Yep, absolutely. Randy Brown, a dude to fade. He got a minus 525 when the line closed on Randy Brown, which is absurd. I had faded him, and I was well on the way to making myself a good little bit of money until he caught that ninja choke. That's some old bullshit. Fade Randy Brown for forever in the UFC. He can't wrestle for shit.
Absolutely. Think about this. He called out Brian Bam Bam Barberena. If that line
is going to crush him.
Crush him. If I think that line would be like somewhere in the 200s, I'm all
Yeah, we're going to get a plus 200. You might get a plus 250, something like that.
On Brian Barberena?
Don't talk about it anymore. Delete this part. Yeah. Just cut it off.
Plus money on Brian Barberena, I'm putting my fucking house on it. That dude's going to murder.
5 Dimes is going to hear this fucking podcast and put like a 125 next to him, and we're all going to buy it, motherfuckers.
I'll buy Brian Barberena at minus 200. If he's minus 125, I'm buying this dude.
All right.
Before we get into our grades for the card and our post-fight bonuses, do you have an Are You Fucking Kidding Me for this fight card?
Do I have an Are You Fucking Kidding Me for this fight card? Usually I would give it out to, I'll give it out to just some judges and I'll just say the judges in general because there was multiple laughable things happening. The scorecards that were turned in on that original draw fight just really didn't make sense. You can go back. I tweeted the actual cards. Some of those judges were clearly watching a fight that I was not seeing because while they got the scores you'd think they should, they got them in the most roundabout fucking ways possible. So I'll give it up to the Texas Commission, showing us once again why you're the greatest commission in the land, with your terrible officiating and your even worse judging.
And my Are You Fucking Kidding Me goes out to the referees on this fight card not named Herb Dean, because in the first 2 fights of the night, we had a point deducted when both guys threw after the bell, and you took the point after the second round had already started, which was ridiculous. And then in the next fight, Randy Brown versus Eric Montano, Randy Brown grabbed the fence, and you gave him at least 8 warnings and still didn't take a point. What the Are you fucking kidding me? Referees not named Herb Dean at UFC Hidalgo. Let's go into our post-fight bonuses. We already gave $50,000 to Chaz the Scrapper Skelly, so each of us have $150,000 left to go. Andrew, I'm going to go first. We're going to give an extra $50,000 to Michael Johnson because if you get a KO from punches in the first round of a main event, you're automatically given an extra $50,000. Have $100,000 left to give to the fight of the night. And, yeah, I guess I'm going to give it to Jose Quinones versus Joey Gomez. There was a lot of back and forth. And that's pretty much it. There was no other fight that could have possibly been fight of the night. You agree?
Yep. No one else actually had. No one else had enough of a back and forth battle. Give Joey Gomez some props, and I think he sold his house for this training camp, so maybe $50,000 will help soothe that poor decision.
Holy shit, that is the worst decision I've ever heard of. So you agree with Michael Johnson, Chaz Skelly, Jose Quinones?
This is exactly the bonuses I would give out.
The dude sold his fucking house?
I love it. Isn't it deep? I thought that he said that in a James Lynch interview, but you know.
Oh my god! I hope it was a trailer house.
I'm hoping that it wasn't like, or maybe it was like in Lawrence, Massachusetts, or something where the value's just plummeting, and it was pretty much going to become a crack den in 2 months anyway.
Holy shit! You sell your house for a training camp. I think that I might.
Guys, a piece of advice: never sell a house for a training camp. Vice versa, like train to then get a bonus and maybe put a down payment on a house.
Wasn't this the fight where Brian Stan was talking about how Jose Quinones said, "I'm fighting for my family"? What are you fighting for, Joey Gomez? Joey Gomez doesn't have a family or anything. He's just out there fighting.
Yeah, but and apparently he doesn't have a house either.
Holy shit!
When you have a family, you're not
Joey Gomez.
Maybe I've invented this story, but I really don't think I did.
I love it. Let's run with it. Joey Gomez is one poor sap. Who's the guy that recently decided to become a prison guard?
Andy Ogle.
Andy Ogle. Joey Gomez, go work with Andy Ogle. Both of you are sad sacks. Holy shit. That is some sad stuff. That's some of the saddest shit I ever heard. Okay, Andrew, let's wrap this show up. It's already sad enough. Let's give this card a grade from A to F, 1 to 100.
Good Lord. I will give this card a grade of a B-. Nope. Yep, B-. Great finishes. There was a lot of shit to go through. There was some really, like, the prelims, there was a lot of shit to slog through. So, even though you aced your finals, you brought that grade to B+. You couldn't get back into the solid B territory.
Now, to your point, Andrew, they aced the finals, but I don't think they aced the finals. If they were to ace the finals, we would have got like at least 7.5 minutes of some back and forth shit before somebody just ended the other person. Instead, we had a total of, between the two fights, like 3 minutes worth of action, and there was no back and forth. So for that reason, and then on top of like the early prelims from Gabriel Benitez versus Sam Cecilia, prior to that on down, there was not much that was happy to be watched. It wasn't great.
Terrible. It
was terrible, you knuckleheads. It was terrible. So I'm gonna give it a C+. So, Andrew, one more question before we get out of here. I have to ask you. So lately, humans are creatures of habit, right? So UFC has been happening every single Saturday for a while now. I find myself getting sad when they don't happen. So I was actually really looking forward to this Saturday because it's habitual.
Yeah.
Have you fallen into that same sink as I have? That same
No, absolutely not. No, I'm here for most Saturdays, but it's just because I try to stay indoors on Saturdays and stay out of trouble. My reckless decision making in my life is now, secluded to Friday evenings. There's enough that I've had to miss enough cards. I missed the Stipe card, so I was anxious to watch a little Hidalgo, and I was hoping for a little bit better card. But there's some weird ones coming up, man. We got like Chris Cyborg fighting Brazil next week. There's some really bizarre shit coming our way, and it's not stopping until the end of the year. There's going to be a lot of, mediocre cards. So go out there and meet your loved ones. Take your girlfriend out. when you see these, pick a couple DVR weekends, guys. Don't stay too committed to the game. But I'm going to be indoors and watching a lot of these. But no, I don't miss it. I don't have Stockholm syndrome yet.
I've got full-on Dana White Stockholm syndrome, Andrew. If I'm not watching a UFC fight card, I don't know what to do with myself. I just kind of drink beer and look at my screen, wishing there was some UFC on. Or you know what? I would sink so low to watch some WSOF.
You watch WSOF? Yeah, no, buy Fight Pass if you're watching WSOF. You could just watch repeats of good fights rather than, you could just watch the regional fights that they're broadcasting on UFC Fight Pass all the time. It's better than SOF.
It definitely is better than WSOF. We didn't talk about it, but Rick Glenn versus Evan Dunham. Rick Glenn looked awful, and he is the former WSOF champion. Anyway, Andrew, we're getting out of here. It's time for you to give the shout-outs, tell everyone where they can find you and everything that you've got going on.
At the Clown Kid on Twitter. Come find me. Message me about MMA. We'll discuss it. My other show is Before the Ballman Speaks. The MMA Circus, hit those up. They have Twitter accounts. Maybe not. You'll find out either way. Peace.
Good luck, motherfuckers. You know where to find me. I'll see you on the next episode of the Flying Brian Show. Until then, keep your hands up. You don't want to get knocked out. That's from The Parting Shot. Namaste.